Welcome to Grace Larson reading. Her book was one of the ones that slid in that I had never heard of, and I read it, and it stuck with me every time I had to make a decision about the book festival, about how I imagined this going, and it represents the best parts of what I value in fiction. Short pieces that reflect the sometimes quieter lives of Montana that we really don't see that often and are sometimes very loud on the inside. So,
thank you.
Grace Larson.
Is this turned on?
Oh, let me change that.
On now? It is on? Okay. Anyway, my name is Grace Larson. I was born in Hot Springs, Montana, 1940, delivered by a midwife. And I grew up, I grew up over at Big Arm, went to school there with my mom and my stepdad, but mainly my grandparents, Dan and May Lawson, over by Hot Springs on the sheep ranch. Anyway, I have done so many different things. And our family fell apart when I was a teenager, and so I will read my diverse occupations. That'll kind of give you an idea of who I am. From age 3 to 16, farm and ranch chores, caring for the chickens, cows, and horses. I carried water and cut and packed wood for the fire and the heater and cook stove. When I was 13, I cut Christmas trees to earn money. When I was 14, 15, and 16, feeding my grandfather's 2,000 head of sheep, harnessing a team, starting a D4 cat, and chopping hay for the sheep. And at age 16, I married Leo. We were married in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I had never seen a roller coaster in my life and had no idea what it was. Leo bought tickets, and I was on the scariest ride of my life. And I've ridden a lot of horses, but I'll tell you what, this was awful. I was wishing I could die. We moved to Red Wing, Minnesota soon after we were married. And then Leo was out of work, so we moved to Colbrand, Colorado, where my mother lived. My son Kevin was born there in 1958. I was 18 that following November. Leo worked for Dr. Ziegel to pay the hospital and doctor bills, a total of $190. Then back to Minnesota and to the Twin Cities. I worked for Old Dutch Potato Chips, packing bags, potato chips in boxes. I worked at White Castle for a while. Then an incident caused me to quit. There wasn't any bus service after midnight when I got off work. Anyway, it was 30 blocks home, but I had no choice but to walk. A car started following me around and scared me to death. I made it to the phone booth, and I called my husband at work, and he came and got me. And thank God he was at work, because he loved to go down to Bay City, Wisconsin, to the bar and different places like that, and he'd skip work, but he happened to be there that night. At 19, I worked in a nursing home. I cooked for 44 residents and also did patient care. This was at Daly's Rest Home in Red Wing, Minnesota. I was pregnant with my second son, Keith Galen. We stayed with Leo's parents until after Keith was born in April of 1960. Then we moved back to the cities again. Leo was working for the Rock Island Railroad, so I was a stay-at-home mom for a little while. At age 21, I went to work for Lawrence Laundry, and in the morning I put eyeglass towels through a huge mangle. There were 2 women that worked with me. In the afternoon, I worked alone. My job was putting continuous towels through the same mangle. I put 2,000 continuous towels through the mangle every afternoon. I worked at the laundry for 2.5 years. At age 23, I was pregnant with my daughter, Renee Janine. We had moved to Ellsworth, Wisconsin. Leo was drawing unemployment. Renee was born March 25th, 1963. We moved back to the Twin Cities again. I went to work for Frito-Lay potato chips, packing small packets into boxes for shipping. And I did various jobs when I was 24, 25, cleaning houses and everything like that. When I was 24, my daughter Robin Bach was born on October 2nd, 1964. She was born in Plum City, Wisconsin. We were living in a farmhouse there. At age 25, I had divorced Leo and I married Vernon on June 5th. And a year later, my son Dan was born. Then I worked at the cherry hemp factory in Winona, Minnesota for a while too, but that's gone out of business. At age 27 to 29, I learned how to paint homes and buildings. Vern was a painter by trade, so I learned from him, but I was more particular and worked with him to assure a job well done. Age 29 to 69, I had a daycare center and I employed 3 women. And I also drove taxi in the afternoon when the children were napping. Age 31 to 40, I was a journeyman painter. I joined the Painters Union, painted homes in Red Wing, Minnesota, and Nibo's huge dining room. In Missoula, I painted the country kitchen, the Pizza Hut, apartment buildings, and so many houses. I also painted the gates on Kerr Dam. When I was 33, the summer of 73, I ran a Pettibone rubber-tired skidder, and I skidded logs. I was able to skid 200 logs a day. That was my 3rd marriage. I was married to Dawn. Anyway, finally, we were living in a tent over in, by Wisdom, and winter was coming. I had to get the house, the trailer moved, the kids in school. It was getting cold, and we were living in a tent. I went to Anaconda, and there was an elderly man that was there on the front porch of the Montana Hotel. He said, "I will get you a job." Boy, what a blessing. I was able to get the trailer moved. I was able to get the kids in school. And I was hired by Andressi Painting and then the Anaconda Company at their new Arbiter plant. And when I was 37, the Arbiter plant closed. That's the year Elvis Presley died. Anyway, then I painted homes. I painted Montana Power buildings. I was foreman for a guy over in Butte. When his work was finished, I went to work for an outfit out of Texas. My boss wore a cowboy hat. I painted pipes and etc. the same as I'd done at the Arbiter plant. This identified the chemicals that ran through the pipes. I sandblasted the combustion pit for the MHD plant. I think the plan that never came to be was to turn coal into gas. At age 39, I went to work at the Montana State Prison as the inmate paint crew supervisor. I had 11 inmates on my crew. We painted the new cubes and bunks for the new prison buildings and also outlying ranch buildings. I was called back to the Anaconda Company and they paid $3 an hour more, so I didn't hesitate to go back. I stayed with the company until they closed down in 1980. Chile had seized the copper processing plant in that country, and this caused the Anaconda Company to go out of business. So when I'm 40 to 43, I went to Spokane Falls Community College, and I took the substance abuse counseling and also a writing class. Alma McCauley was my writing instructor. The book that I worked on was The Making of a Con. There was a gentleman on my crew when I worked at the prison. If he was alive today, he'd be in special ed. His glasses were about a half-inch thick, and he would just, he fell into trouble every time he turned around when he was a kid. And that's why I call it the making of a con. But that's his story. I took the tape recorder in, and he recorded all of it, and I can verify it. He's buried over Terry, Montana with military headstone. When I was 43, I graduated from Spokane Falls with honors. I had one B, and all the rest of my grades were A's. I was out of school when I was 12 years old because I took 2 grades at once, and I started when I was 5. And when I started college, I was scared to death. Well, I was scared all the way through. But I managed to graduate with honors. Then I went to work over at Forsyth as a chemical dependency and family counselor. I went to a lot of different seminars, and the ones that I really enjoyed were the adult children of alcoholic parents seminars. And I came back from those and started groups for these, for my clients. And a lot of them were Crow, Cheyenne, and today, and I'm in contact with most of these people, they have healthy families, and I am so thankful. At age 46, my daughter Robin passed away from MS. The pain was so horrific, it can't even put it into words. Age 66 to 73, Lyle retired in January of 2001. I was glad to have him home every day. We could do things together. Lyle raised a huge garden, planted apple trees. We made apple cider, canned as many vegetables and fruits as we could. We raised and sold horses. 2 sales that we're really proud of is a Palomino mare that went to Israel and a black mare that went to the Netherlands. I started writing again during this time, and Immigrant, a Homesteader and Sheep was started in 2012. Our travels, we went to the San Diego Zoo, SeaWorld, Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Jackson Hole, with so many different places that we have gone to. Our favorite was horseback riding up in the Bighorn Mountains. At age 73, Lyle passed away. I was 73. I stayed on our place until November of 2014 when I moved to Kalispell. Lyle had kept up the yard, garden, apple trees, etc., but with my being accident prone, it was my idea to just move and be in a safer environment. My main focus during this time was Aunt Faye Pawlawson Haynes. She was 88 years old. She had macular degeneration. It had become so advanced she could no longer drive. I would drive to her place near Ronan, and we would take trips to Hot Springs, going past her and Bill's Big Bend Ranch. The Pizza Hut in Polson was one of her favorites, and the restaurant in Ronan's Cheeseburgers. Faye enjoyed coffee time and rodeos. We went to a lot of rodeos and watched them on her television, too. I took her to Glacier Park. On one trip, it was special because her sister-in-law, Grace, was able to get leave from the rest home, and she went with us. July 21st, 2019, my son Dan passed away in Sacramento, California. He had brain cancer, but 3 years when he was first diagnosed, he started using vodka to slow his runaway thoughts. And in 3 years, he passed away not only from the brain cancer, but from cirrhosis of the liver. And he had never touched alcohol in his life until 3 years before. My son Kevin and I drove to the funeral, which was in Dixon, California. Dan was laid to rest in the Dixon Military Cemetery. His widow Jill and their children Savannah and Jenny were there. We didn't have much time to visit because Kevin had to be back to work. Aunt Faye passed away on November 22nd, 2019, my 79th birthday. She didn't have anything prepared, and only a few of the pallbearers were still living. Anyway, I had another funeral to plan, as I had planned Robin's, and of course Lyle let me know everything that he wanted, so that was no problem. At age 79 to the present, I completed Once in a Lifetime Comes a Man about my wonderful husband. The Making of a Con was pulled out of the drawer and published. I published An Immigrant, a Homesteader and Sheep, Bum Lambs, Faye, and Montana's Last Hanging. My Aunt Faye is in the Montana, anyway, the Cowboy Rodeo Association Awards. She was chosen for that. Anyway, now, this is my 8th book. At age 80, I made a trip to Spokane to visit my grandchildren, then a trip to Minnesota to visit my daughter Renee and my 6 great-grandchildren. I made a trip back to Spokane again in late August of last year. The name of my short story book was my granddaughter Jin's Brilliant Mind, From Dusk Till Dawn in the Wild World. Okay, so that's why that's the name. And Jill will, in 2 years, Jill will enter medical school, and her brother just started RAT. So my son that passed away left a wonderful legacy. My next story, I'm just writing excerpts of this. The Pryor Mountain Mustangs. The Pryor Mountain wild horses have been traced back to the colonial Spanish horse using DNA testing. The colonial Spanish horse is now a heritage breed. The Pryor Mustangs originated from the colonial Spanish horse, but not all feral horses of the Americas today are of colonial Spanish descent. There has been considerable crossbreeding in some areas. The colonial Spanish breed comes from the feral populations that were raised in the Iberian Peninsula, the peninsula that separates Spain from Portugal. Pryor Mountain Mustangs are relatively small horses, usually 14 hands, although some are taller or shorter. A hand is 4 inches, and a 14-hand horse stands 56 inches. Pryor Mountain Mustangs exhibit a natural ambling gait, and domesticated Mustangs are known for their strength, sure-footedness, and stamina. Some of the Mustangs have a dorsal stripe that runs down their back and zebra stripes on their legs. These markings aren't always present on each Mustang, though all of them have a dorsal stripe on their back. The colors vary. Duns of various shapes, gorilla, buckskin, bay, black, sorrel, chestnut, and red, and blue roan. Palominos are rare. Medicine Bow was the last Pryor horse to show the Sabino color pattern. This is one of the wild horses here. There's a picture of him in my book. That picture was taken by Joseph Filer. My husband and I made many trips to the Pryor Mountains to see the wild horses. They came right up to our camp once. They're curious, and as long as all is still, they have no need, or they will check it out. It is believed that wild horses have been in the Pryor since the late 17th century. The native tribe owned hundreds of these wild horses. When the pioneers arrived, there were thousands of wild horses in Montana and Wyoming. Ranch-raised stallions were turned loose to breed with wild mares, this cross resulting in tough horses for the cavalry. War horses. My book, Faye, tells the stories of her husband, Bill Haynes, as he trained these horses for the military. This was in northern Montana, near Babb, in the late 30s and early 40s. And in 1941, Life magazine reported that the U.S. Army was supplying itself with 20,000 horses. In fact, according to the magazine, it was the biggest order for horses the Army had placed since the Civil War. On the battlefield, cavalry made a number of contributions during World War II. Horses were still used in the war in Afghanistan. And I don't remember the mare's name, but remember the famous mare from Korea? When she would go on, they'd send her after supplies. She'd go down the mountain after the supplies and come back to the troops. And there's a story about her, but I cannot remember her name, but it's on the internet. This is a story I thought when I was coming back from visiting my grandchildren. And I remembered a book I'd read by Kahlil Gibran years and years ago. Our dreams cannot be our children's dreams. Anyway, Kahlil Gibran was born in 1883 and he died in 1931. And he wrote, "And a woman who held a babe against her bosom said, 'Speak to us of children.' And he said, 'Your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts, for they have their own thoughts. You may house their bodies, but not their souls, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. You may strive to be like them, but seek not to make them like you. For life goes not backward, nor tarries with yesterday. You are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are set forth. The archer sees the mark upon the path of the infinite, and he bends you with his might, that his arrows may go swift and far. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he loves also the bow that is stable." Anyway, I had been to Spokane to visit my son Dan's adult children, and on the way home I thought about this man's writings and how his words apply to my relationship with my children and grandchildren today. We want our children to be more successful in life than we were. And even with my grandchildren, I want that same success in their lives. My children and grandchildren have far surpassed what I have achieved in my lifetime at this time I wrote this, of 80 years. Dan's son and his wife are exploring Western Washington just as Lyle and I did almost 40 years ago. Kettle Falls, Spokane parks, and the famous merry-go-round. The beautiful Spokane River that runs into the Columbia and Hawk Falls, where Dan scared me to death when he took the canoe so far out in the river. The streets Lyle and I drove, and Dan drove as he delivered flowers for Jean. As I watched the joy my grandson and his wife share, it made my heart sing a happy song. I pray that they are as happy and pleased with the happiness they have found. Sadly, Lyle and Dan are no longer with us. Dan's widow and daughter, Dan's youngest, have moved to Spokane, where they will all share some of the very same things Lyle and I did. Each generation has accomplished more than the previous generation, as it should be. As I watched my grandchildren, I was amazed at how responsible they are and how involved they are in helping others. My definition of success is being fulfilled, happy, safe, healthy, and loved. It is the ability to strive for your goals, whatever those goals may be. My grandchildren are living successful lives. Let your bending in the archer's hand be for gladness, for even as he loves the arrow that flies, so he also loves the bow that is stable. Life for my children was anything but stable. The next generation created that stability I was unable to have for my children. But my bending in the archer's hand is for gladness for my children and grandchildren and their journey through life here on our beautiful earth. Their hopes and dreams are their own, and I'm glad for them, for their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow, which you cannot visit, not even in your dreams. Thank you. You know, I watched my husband's nephew and my husband's brother and this very thing, and his brother tried to control his son. It was, well, I watched my own son with Michael, his boy. Oh my gosh, that boy had to play soccer and he had to, you know, hockey, things that he didn't enjoy at all, but by golly, Dad did, you know. So anyway, that really came to life, you know, and I was thinking about everything when I was driving home and kind of wrote the book or the story as I was coming home. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
So are all of your children in the Spokane area?
No. Renee lives in Red Wing, Minnesota. She's married to a wonderful man, Steve. They have 2 boys that are absolutely lazy. And, well, they babied those kids, you know, they didn't have to make a bed or do a dish or anything. You know, that was just, and Dad, of course, he grew up in a home with an alcoholic father, you know, so his kids were going to have it better. Well, they had it too good, and they still take advantage of Mom and Dad. But, oh, I like Steve so much. He's just so good for my daughter. Then I have Keith. He lives in Chula Vista, California. He's married to a gal from Mexico. He's retired. He worked for the city of Spokane for years, installing air conditioning and heating and all that kind of stuff. And my son Kevin lives with me now, my oldest. He's 64, and he retired from nuclear power. He was an operator for 30 years, and then he trained operators in Pennsylvania and Texas. And he has a NASCAR collection that's amazing. The Daily Interlake's coming out to interview him tomorrow. And I said, next to the NASCAR museum, I don't think they'll ever find anything like he has. His bedroom, the garage, every door, you know. But anyway, oh, I have a garden. Oh, I have a pet rabbit. And I also have 6 pullets that should start laying eggs here pretty soon. But I garden and I can. I've canned a lot of tomatoes and green beans and a lot of meat, particularly beef, because I think, you know, they're talking about it's going to be very hard to get pretty soon or very high. So anyway, that's kind of what I do now. Yeah, yep, yep. Yes, yes. Okay, so I don't know where your son went, but does anybody have any questions? As I say, the only thing I could use to describe my life, Eleanor Roosevelt, and that's in one of my books, she said, you do what you think you cannot do. Like when I painted the gates of Kerr Dam, I'd never done that before. When I started the D4 cat, my uncle showed me how. Oh, when Lyle and I were going together, he bet me I couldn't start the cat, and I started it just like that. But anyway, things, you know, that you think you can't do, and yet, by gosh, you can. You know, you just have to try. And if you fail, try again. Yeah.
I wasn't here for the beginning of your talk, I'm sorry, but I'm wondering how you...
Could you come closer, please? Yeah, because I've got almost 82-year-old ears, and I haven't got a hearing aid yet.
I'm just wondering how you started writing. Like, what was your education?
Well, I wrote some poetry years ago. I wrote a poem for each of my kids, you know, when they were growing up. But I never did anything with it. And then when I went to college, I took the tapes from the inmate, you know, and my girlfriend typed those up, and we made the making of a con. But when I really decided to get serious was my grandparents' history. I did not want that to be lost. Yeah,
That's so interesting. If only everyone was so invested in their family history in that way.
yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
thank you.
Yeah.
But can you imagine a doctor in hospital today for a baby? I mean, it was $190 some for Kevin, and look what it is today. The doctor owned the ranch and he owned the hospital. Yeah. Lyle and I took a trip down through Arizona and Colorado, and we drove up to Colbrand, and the hospital's still there, but it's a nursing home now. Yeah. So, but anyway, we went so many places together. In my book, Once a Lifetime Comes a Man, that's about Lyle and my life together too. It wasn't, we had a big red dog, golden retriever. He wouldn't ever do anything he was supposed to do. And anyway, we were driving down the coast in Oregon, and Lyle wanted me to look for campgrounds. Well, I didn't know how to read a map. I mean, after all, so there's all kinds of campgrounds. Pretty soon he says, "Give me that map." I gave it to him, and oh, Grace, what are you doing? I was embarrassed to death, and I felt so dumb, So then I got upset. Well, then we walked through the sand dunes, and of course he stopped to get some chicken. Well, he's walking along, and he's got his hand down here with the chicken. A dog comes up behind him and grabs the chicken. Of course, I'm upset with him, so I think that's just great. But anyway, we had a wonderful life together. And he came to me in a dream. I hadn't seen him for 18 years. He was my first husband's friend, and actually kind of in the family. And I was going to Spokane Falls, and I had a dream about Lyle and two boys. And I thought he probably was married, and those were his children. But I didn't even know if he was alive or what. So I called his brother, Lloyd, and pretend like I was an old Navy buddy, because I got a deeper voice. Anyway, he wasn't married. He was 46 years old, never been married. And so I called him, and we started writing to each other and calling each other. And then that was in November of 81. And then I went back in June of 82, but I had to get back to Spokane. Well, he lived in Maid Rock, Wisconsin. He was on a farm. So anyway, I had to get back for class. So my visit was only a couple weeks. And of course, my daughter lived back there, and my oldest son at that time. But then I went back. Of course, we kept calling each other and writing letters, and I came back again in September, and then I came back in December when he moved out to Washington with me, and that was December 13th. And anyway, from there, we got married in Spokane at my friend's home, and then from there we moved to Colstrip. When we were moving to Spokane, we went through Colstrip, and I said, I wonder who in the world would want to live there. Guess what? That's where I got my first job. I never say never. But one thing I do, as I look back on my life, I think the good Lord, he's been there every step of the way, even when I didn't even know he was there, so. But I guess I'm through unless anybody has questions. Okay. Thank you.